Rich Walker, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
My pleasure to be here, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you are a man with many stories and experiences, and I'm excited to dive into one that's close to your heart and close to mine today. But before we do, would you mind introducing yourself, who you are, and how you're showing up in the world today for our audience to set the stage for our conversation today?
Sure. So I am the CEO of Quick, which is a software company that I co-founded back in 2002. And what we do is we make it easier to process forms and paperwork, the things that you're filling out by hand at the DMV, et cetera, college applications, anything that's handwritten, we make that so much easier. We serve the financial services market. We have over 41,000 forms across the industry in a library where people can access them, pre-fill them with data, get them signed with DocuSign or Signix, and in essence, do the paperwork faster and easier and make it a better experience for everybody. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I've started 10 companies since age 12. This software company is by far the longest lasting one, the best one, the most successful one. I've authored 2 books. I'm a father of 3 little boys, and I'm married to my soulmate.
Amazing. And the topic today is about one of these books that, again, I'm excited to dive into because I think it has the secret ingredient of what's possible in all of these things to have successful companies, to have your soulmate. These are a lot of things that a lot of people seek, and it's hard to find the balance. And can you tell us a bit about your book, How to Change is the title, right?
It is called It's My Life. I Can Change If I Want to. And
Ah,
it's a 4-step methodology for how to create any kind of change you want in your life. So I actually think of it more like a primer to any other kind of self-improvement you're trying to do. And one of the challenges I have is I've read other self-improvement books, especially in my youth, trying to figure out my life and who I am, et cetera. And I don't like to read. This is kind of a funny thing that I've written a book, but I don't like to read. So you spend weeks and weeks reading a book and it tells you who it hurts and why it should change and how it impacts people, whatever that topic is, right? The
mhm.
problem I have is you've read the book for 3 or 4 weeks now. What are the steps? What are the action steps? Like, how do you actually change this one behavior that you're trying to change? And so my book is kind of like the primer for that. And I like to let people in on a secret about my book. Chapter 1 is all you have to read because I wrote this for the non-reader like myself. Chapter 1 tells you everything about the process, and the rest of the chapters go in depth with better examples, and adds a few chapters for context and I think just interest in the overall change process.
Mm. Well, I'm curious in some of the ways that you see change differently. I think this is change is something, and even how you relate to this idea, because I find that there's a lot of emotions associated with change. Usually, when we encounter change, we're not happy about it in the beginning or in the first impressions of it, and the meaning that we make of it while it's happening is usually very different than the meaning we make of it after it's happened. Um,
True.
and and in my personal experience, I'll be honest and vulnerable. There's many times I've done a lot with my business. I've advanced and progressed myself, and there's also many different coaching programs and courses and inspirations that I've had and books that I've read for that matter that I have been excited about for some amount of time and worked a little bit to implement, and then kind of went back down to this baseline kind of level. And I know it's something really common in my world, but what's at the source that's keeping a lot of us from really changing or integrating these things that we aspire to?
Actually, this is the first 1 and 2 steps of my process if I can go through it.
Yeah.
And I'll offer some background in a second around that. But just to answer your question, the very first step in the process, believe it or not, is you have to want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds really trivial. Like a lot of people want to lose weight, a lot of people want to make more money, a lot of people want to be better in their relationship, whatever change they're thinking about. But do you really want to? I mean, you have to have such a strong motivational desire to push you past the challenges and the pain and the sacrifices that change requires. The second, so if you can do that, if you can honestly say, I really, really want this and I'm willing to commit to the process, then you can go to step two. And step two, man, this is a hard one too. You have to believe you can change. And there's so many reasons people don't believe they can change. Maybe it's how they were raised. Maybe it's an organization like a religion. Maybe it's a culture. Maybe it's money. There's so many reasons people say to themselves, oh no, I could never change. I could never be that. But here's the truth. I'm not requiring that you believe you can change the thing you want to change. The process requires the belief, the simple belief that you can change. So Kyle, here's my question. Have you ever cut your hair? Did you ever read a book and learn something? Did you ever try something new and fail? Guess what? You changed. If you can do any of those things, did you put on different clothes today or the same clothes from yesterday? You changed. I mean, honestly, it's that simple to say, I believe I can change, to allow yourself to move forward in the process. So if you want to interrupt me, please do. But I'd also like to give a backdrop as to why I think this way and why I came to this kind of conclusion. And it started really early in my childhood. So at the time of us talking right now, I'm 50 years old. Believe it or not, I've moved 33 times in my life. And I had moved 28 of those times by the time I was 30 years old. I think that's the number. So I went through a lot of change as a kid, forced upon me. Marriages, divorces that my mom went through, job transfers that we went through. Every city and school was new to me. If you imagine the kids on all those different shows, movies you've seen where there's a new kid being introduced to class, sometimes he's the darling of the class, sometimes he's teased, sometimes at the front desk, sometimes the back desk, all those situations. I have personally lived all of those situations. I've been bullied because I was new. I've been adored because I was new. Weird. So I've been forced through a ton of different changes. And one of the things that really impacted me was, I think I was around 8 years old. My mom had picked us, my brother, my sister, and I up, going for a drive from California back to Utah where we lived. And she said to us three kids, this is like nighttime driving in the desert, kids, I have some news for you. We're moving to Reno, Nevada. My brother and I, being little kids, were just like, yay, this is great, exciting. My sister was bawling. She was crying. And I couldn't understand it. And what she said to us was, happiness is a choice. It's your choice to see this change as something good or bad. It's your choice to look ahead and say, will it impact me in a positive way or a negative way? And then she started going through the situation. She said, guess what? We're going to go live in the hotel that our stepfather was going to manage. They'd built an apartment for us. Well, it sounds like a step back from maybe the house we were living in. But you know what we got? We got maid service. It's a hotel. There's maids. They came and cleaned our place all the time. We got a pool for the first time in our lives. We had a restaurant on premise that we could eat at for free anytime we wanted. Now, this is coming to a family that lived on welfare where we took scraps. We would eat anything we could get. And so to suddenly have these benefits, and there was another key benefit, the hotel would pay for our groceries. So suddenly we had an unlimited spend at a grocery store. We could buy anything we wanted when we couldn't afford most of anything at all prior. So I had this kind of backdrop of having gone through a lot of changes in my life and realizing change is a constant. Things are always changing. It's really how you choose to deal with them that matters most.
I like that opportunity and seeing that within the hotel. Do you have a parallel from later on in your entrepreneurial journeys where maybe you're the same quote echoed in your head, happiness is a choice?
Sure. Oh, yeah. I've been through so many difficult situations in my company. So I'll tell you another one. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a funny thing. We won a client in 2010, which became a significant portion of our revenue. We did a lot of work for this client, and we were building something custom for them that we thought maybe we could take to market for others as well. At the end of the year in December, called the customer to say, hey, we're ready to go to test with you to start rolling this out. And the response from the customer was, that's awesome. However, our parent company just shut us down. 350 people are going to lose their job for Christmas this year. which means that we just lost our biggest client, which meant that we were going to see a revenue fall of 45%. So that should stress you out. How does a company recover from losing 45% of their revenue suddenly? And we had about a 2-month runway of them still paying us to try to figure things out. Okay, so simultaneously, this is when I decided to ask my now wife to marry me. So I have the ring. I'm super nervous about asking her. And I have this situation where I'm about to lose my company essentially. But Kyle, I got to tell you something. It didn't stress me out that I was going to potentially lose my company, because I looked at that situation and said, we just have choices and facts here. I can choose to be unhappy about this and stressed and worried, or I can choose to be productive and figure out how do we get through this situation. And the fun part about this story is that my wife figured that I was nervous about losing the customer, when in fact, I was only nervous about asking her to marry me. So I got to hide under the guise of what this customer, I felt so bad for the customer, all these people losing their job. But the impact on us, and I've been through lots of situations like this where when I look at change, I just address it as I can change or I can't. It's my choice.
Excellent. Tell me about where did you propose?
My wife's from South Africa. So we were flying out to see her family for Christmas, and we had planned a trip to Cape Town. I don't know if you've been to Cape Town, but there's a mountain there called Table Mountain. And it is a huge plateau, 1 kilometer off the coastline. You take an aerial tram up there. And I proposed up there where you could see for infinitely across the ocean. And I had her brother and her father's videotape the whole thing. I had them in on it. So I stood in front of her and said, Janine, I've proven to you that I will go to the end of the world for you, because here we are standing at the end of the world. And then I proposed to her, and it was super shocking. It was funny.
And how did she communicate to you that she thought you were nervous about the client?
Oh, just after the fact. I mean, she's like, I thought you were acting weird, but I thought it was the client. And I'm like,
Nice.
the client is just business. We'll figure that out.
Great.
Yeah, her father was also acting weird because I don't know if he wanted me to ask for her hand in marriage, but I insisted on asking him.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard part was I had about 60 seconds to do it, meaning the time that she was not in the room with him and he was around.
Yeah.
So I had this super brief window. I pulled him aside and he's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So he was acting awkward too after the fact. And so she was sensing something like, what is weird? And so I would just play it off like, yeah, this thing is so stressful. But no, it was asking her.
Was there any time in this process of the 45, maybe it was when the call happened, that this same yearning of making a bad meaning or a scary or afraid meaning out of it, or fearing the change, you like sensed it coming and you made a choice?
So look, I think we all go through this.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you receive bad news? It's bad. It sucks. You feel terrible. You're like, wait, what? It's shocking, right? To find out that I had worked so hard, my team had worked so hard for almost 12 months to build this product. And to then not only not get the product to this customer and solve their problem, but to find out we were going to lose a huge chunk of our business. I mean, you have to understand, Kyle, I was now facing firing a bunch of people. I was facing cutting back. I was facing not having a salary. I was facing potentially losing my company. It's exceptionally stressful, right? That kind of hit in the face of boom. You just bought a ring. You're about to go on a 3-week trip and you just lost your biggest customer. So yeah, I went through that kind of, I think there's a human psychology part of like fear and acceptance and anger and all those stages, whatever the order is. So I know I went through that, but see what's in my head is a positive tape loop, if you will. It's not even a tape loop. It's really just positive thinking around how to go through change and how to go through difficult situations. Because I have chosen that I am capable of getting through any of these hard situations. I've been through so many that I feel like I can get through this. If it meant I lost my company, to me, the worst case scenario was I'd go make 6 figures working for somebody else. I knew I could always support my income. But to save the company and save my team and everything else, those were just choices. Here, as an entrepreneur, I think leaders make the best decisions with facts, not assumptions. This was a hard, cold fact. We were going to lose the money. So now I went into thinking time and said, how are we going to fix this? And I met with my COO and my team, and we sat down and we created strategies for how we're going to weather the storm and how we're going to get through it. And I think once you have a plan, you can put all those other fears aside. It's still going to be hard. Like, imagine you're on a ship going into a storm. You might have the safest ship in the world. You might know it totally can get through the storm. Does it make it less scary? No. Do you think move 33 was the easiest move ever? It was actually the worst move I've ever had in my life. I knew what to expect. I knew what challenges come with it. And it literally was the worst move of my life. So I think, change is one of those things that people fear it because it's hard. But if you take the right steps to say, I want this, I believe I can do it, then it becomes easier. By the way, I'm happy to go through the other two steps. I don't mean to leave them as a cliffhanger if that would help.
Yeah, I thought we had want to change and believe to change. I thought those were the whole two.
There's four.
So there's
four steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us go back to that then.
All right. So here's the meat and potatoes. If you want to change and believe you can change, the next step is to address the behavior that you're currently experiencing. And I like to give this analogy. Let's pretend that you are a tree. And if you imagine a tree, you have a core, a trunk, right? And then you have a bunch of branches and leaves. Let's say that each leaf on your tree is one of your behaviors. So pick a behavior, your behavior towards spending money or not spending money, your behavior towards talking to people or not talking to people, your belief about love or anything. Mm-hmm. So you pick something that you want to change. And the one I love to think about is, let's say you go through life thinking that everybody's got something better than you. You want your boss's car. You want your sister's house. You want to go on the vacation your best friend got to afford. And you feel like you're never happy. You're never getting what you want, no matter how hard you work. And you realize, wow, this is not serving me well. I don't like feeling unhappy. I want to change this behavior. So first of all, imagine it as a leaf on the tree. What I want you to do in step 3 is to ask yourself questions to diagnose the behavior. And I want you to ask questions that start with who, where, what, how, when, but not why. Because I believe the brain has this magical ability to answer any question you give it. The problem with a why question is that it usually begets a negative answer. If you ask yourself, if you say you want to lose weight and you say, why can't I lose weight? What does it come back with? Because you're lazy? Because you don't do the right things? That's not constructive. I want you to instead ask the questions, when can I lose weight? How can I lose weight? Where could I lose weight? Who does it impact that I don't lose weight? How does it impact my life if I don't lose weight? So same thing, you're feeling unhappy. When do I feel unhappy? Well, when I see other people having things I don't have. How does it impact my life? Well, it's affecting my marriage. Whatever those answers are. And write them down, think through them. Because in the answers to those questions, and there's no limit to how many questions you ask, but in the answer to those questions are clues that drive back down to the core belief that is causing this behavior. So now let's think about this. If you have a leaf on a tree and you want to change the behavior, what would you typically do? You'd cut off the leaf. What will happen? It'll grow back. This is the problem with habits, right? You're like, I'm going to stop smoking. And you do it for a few days, and what happens? You start smoking again because it's such a strong habit. Maybe it's also chemical. I don't mean to make that light of that. But any kind of behavior you have, if you just try to use the brute force willpower way of stopping, you actually haven't solved it. A new leaf will form. So what do you have to do? You have to trace the branch that leaf came from down through the roots to where it's being fed and stop feeding it. That is a core belief. So let's say you do this analysis where you say, I'm unhappy seeing people have things that I don't have. And you ask these hard questions of who does it impact? And you see clues and you start asking more questions and you trace it backwards by asking these questions. What if you discovered that you remember being 10 years old playing soccer and you lost the game and your dad came up to you and said, hey, don't worry about it. Just work harder. Never settle for second best. Just keep working hard so you can be first and win. Okay, that sounds very reasonable to a 10-year-old. Like, yeah, go work hard. Practice more, become better at your sport. You will win next time. Don't settle for second best. That sounds like perfectly reasonable advice to give a 10-year-old. But now you're 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever. And that core belief is now wrapped up with all these other things in your life. And you're looking at that car you don't have and saying, I don't settle for second best. You may not hear yourself say that, but that's what's going on in your brain. It's manifesting in other thoughts like, oh, I want that house. I want that car. I want that vacation. I work so hard. It's never good enough, because you can't be the best at everything, right? Okay, so here's the thing. In step 3, you're trying to identify the core belief. Let's just pretend that is the core belief, that you shouldn't settle for second best. Step 4 is where change becomes easy. And this is why I love this methodology. Step 1 and 2 is actually easy. If you want to change and believe you can change. Step 3 can be hard because you got to figure out the core belief. But step 4 is easy because all you now have to do is adopt a new belief. So what if your new belief is, I'll never settle for unhappiness? Now, you asked all these questions. When does it happen? Where does it happen? How does it happen, etc. Go back and look at those and plug in the new belief. When I see my boss driving his fancy car that I wish I had and I feel unhappy, the new belief is I don't settle for unhappiness. So now I'm going to choose to not feel unhappy about that situation. Same thing when I see the house and the vacation and anything else. You're choosing the new belief. And to the extent you've identified where the old belief is happening, by simply crafting a new belief, it's easy to install it and plug it into those situations. Now, Kyle, I'm going to admit something. There are some changes that can be done in milliseconds because they're so easy. And there are some changes that will take you 10 years to experience all those situations where your old belief was being used. And maybe this is because some of those experiences are really edge cases. Maybe they just don't happen frequently. Maybe they don't happen until you meet somebody from your old life. So when you have the new belief installed, it's a matter of choosing that belief each time you come across the situation where the old belief was. And by having thought through it in step 3, it's easier to identify, but not perfect. Here's the other clue. Work on only one change at a time. Because if you had to try to install 5 new beliefs or 10 new beliefs, it might just be too hard to remember them all. So work on one and just keep practicing that and then start again with the next one. I have more to add to this, but I'm going to stop and see what questions you have.
One of the things I'm hearing in this that's interesting to me is in step 3, there's also a what to change. And this is something that you've kind of moved around, but it seems like one of the most difficult things is knowing what to change about you. Or maybe there's several things that we want to improve about ourselves all at the same time. And the process that you're describing of examining your beliefs first allows you not only to decide, but to clarify this, which I think is a really important and overlooked part of the process. If you see 12 different choices in front of you and you don't know which one to choose, it's often just better to walk away. But when you have this process that you're describing and narrowing what is the next best step, then it makes things a lot easier and more approachable.
It does. It does. There's a couple of really important benefits to this whole process and really the concept that I'm trying to engage here. So the first one is, I want you to think about this. What you believe forms your reality. And I want to show a diagram from my book. Hopefully it'll come across on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is a bullseye chart where reality is at the bullseye and facts are on the outside. So I want you to kind of study this for a second in your head, and I'm going to talk through it. Reality is what you experience, but facts are immutable. Okay. So let's say, for example, it's 55 degrees outside. That's a fact. Like, you measure it. But how do you experience it versus how do I experience it? Your reality might be you're from a very hot climate and 55 is freezing. That's when you want gloves and hat and parkas on. What if I came from a very, very cold climate where I'm used to 0 degrees? I get to 55, I'll be sweating. In fact, this happened on Ernest Shackleton's adventure to Antarctica. They got trapped down there for 18 months. They got so acclimated to the very, very cold weather. When it heated up to 30 degrees, they literally shed all their clothes because they were sweating, where the rest of us would be freezing. So I think of that as facts versus reality. So how do we get there? A fact is actually interpreted through what you believe. So beliefs drive your interpretation of a fact. I believe 55 is cold. You believe 55 is warm. Two different beliefs about the same fact. Thoughts emanate from your beliefs. A belief really has no way to be articulated until you give it a thought. You give it words. Well, what thoughts come from that? Oh, I'm cold, right? You're giving yourself the thought of, this is freezing. Those are all thoughts you're having. And so they manifest from the belief, which is interpreting a fact. And those beliefs and thoughts then form how you actually experience it. Somebody else with a different belief that 55 is warm is going to have different thoughts. Wow, this is really nice weather, or it's really warm. I'm sweating now. Their reality is different. So if you think about life that way, the trick to life then, to have the reality you want, is to have the beliefs you want. And the other benefit is, if thoughts stem from your beliefs, and you're somebody who's constantly going through negative tape loops, playing things over and over, things maybe your parents said to you that has now stuck with you, that's a negative, like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough. I can never get ahead. I never have enough money. Things like that. Well, with the right belief in place, those thoughts disappear. They just vanish. And in fact, when you really understand your beliefs and write them down, as many as you can, I've documented, I think, over 60 different beliefs that run my life. The tape loop stops entirely. I don't have all these errant thoughts running through my head constantly, like, oh, I'm this or I'm that. I live with a lot of peace, frankly, because I've identified the core beliefs that I think are the most empowering ones for me, and therefore give me the reality I want. I'm not saying I'm perfect, Kyle. I'm always working on myself. I had a major breakthrough earlier this year with a belief that was formed back when I was around 22 years old that I didn't realize I had. And when it was identified and I changed it, things changed so positively for me. I felt like I had this massive weight lifted off my shoulders. And I didn't even realize I was holding on to that belief until somebody else challenged me and said, why are you pushing back so hard on that? Happy to describe that more, but without going deep in the story.
Well, this is another interesting thing, is that these things are transparent to us. And a lot of the times, before we understand them and get them pointed out, and a lot of times it takes somebody other than us to do that, we are very clever in our self-deception, and will often create the illusion that projects us as some kind of like righteous victim of the circumstance, or like something outside of us is causing this to us. And we'll go along just carrying along about that for a long time, feeling justified, feeling like we're in the right within ourselves, unless we have the good fortune of somebody else usually showing us a different perspective, which is uncomfortable at first, but often some of the most valuable feedback we can get.
You've just reminded me, my favorite chapter in my book, which is not about the methodology, it's more to help you, is called The Victim's Roadblock to Success, and how being a victim really blocks you to getting where you want to be. And there's different types of victims out there, which I'm not going to be able to articulate because I wrote it a long time ago and haven't read it since. But it's a great type of concept to think about, exactly what you're saying. Because if your beliefs and thoughts form the reality, and you believe you're a victim, you form a reality of being a victim and having no ability to change and no ability to grow and get out of that situation. So it comes back to believing what you want to achieve. This is why I love when people talk about get out of your own way, or to be your best self, because your best self is inside of you, just clouded by thoughts and beliefs that aren't letting you free. So you got to find the right ones. And I do think you need other people in your life to challenge and mirror you so that you can see the ones that you are blind to. But we don't have to start with the blind ones. We can start with the ones we know about right now that we want to change, that we've always wanted to change. Choose that one and go for it. I want to describe something else that I think is quite magical about this. If you choose to change one belief, how many leaves does that belief actually feed? I said start with the behavior that leaf represents and trace it back to the root. Well, how many other leaves are on the branch? So what happens is when you change a core belief is it often affects multiple behaviors at once. And when you start changing multiple beliefs, you can change the entire structure of your behavior, therefore what your tree looks like. And sometimes it doesn't even take that many beliefs to have a profound change in your life. It might just take some really critical ones that you've thought through and chosen to change.
Yeah. Ooh, I think we are ready for a story.
All right.
Christmas season is coming, and I am sitting down at my desk, absolutely excited. My company's growing quickly, and we are on our way to a big success with one of our biggest clients, a product that we've been working on for months that I was very, very proud of. I have a ring sitting on my desk. It's time to ask my wife to marry me, and I'm so excited after all of this work and all of these things. And with the desk or with the ring sitting there and shining on my desk, I start to open up my emails and feel a drop in my stomach as my biggest client that is like a huge source of revenue for my own company and my team is telling us that they suddenly need to stop. And sitting there in the silence of that moment, seeing the other emails from team members, people I may need to let go of now, wanting to blame the world, wanting to blame other people, feel unvalued. And it was there in that moment that I noticed this tape playing, this old tape that thankfully by now I had been practicing for some great amount of time. Because this was just yet another time of change for me in my life and something that I had been through so many times. I can remember in this moment, or just right in this moment, my mother telling me when I was younger that change is what you, or sorry, let's see. What was it? You have to like change, or change. Happiness is a choice. And I take a moment to think, to echo these words in my head and stop the tape of the old programs and the old things and everything that I had been putting together. And I carried on. I did what I could. I knew what I could influence, and I had a plan. Thanks to being able to face change and face myself through the change, even though it was hard, and even though there's always struggle and uncertainty in it, I gave myself steps to move forward instead of beating myself up and sitting in these old beliefs that I didn't need anymore. A few weeks later, I found myself in Cape Town, South Africa, hiking up to the top of an incredible mountain, Table Mountain, or with an aerial tram. And my wife looks at me and she notices some nervousness on my face. She knows what I had been going through in my business and the challenges we had, and I'm sure she's grateful that I have the courage to be out here with her. But she has no idea what's about to happen. We get to the top of the mountain, and I kneel down and I propose. With tears in my eyes and everything in that moment, I gave my whole heart, my whole presence, everything to her. And it was thanks to this process, my ability to adapt, to change, to focus on who I wanted to be, what I wanted to be in every moment. And it finally led me to here in this moment. And as she says yes, and we're kissing and giggling after, and she said, I thought you were nervous because of your client. And I have to admit that there were times where that was a challenge for me. But thanks to this process that I had been through, I was able to always gracefully navigate to the next best thing that I could do and embrace change instead of resist it. And in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to teach you this exact same process so that you can thrive and change yourself.
Wow. Wow. Like that's the TED Talk. It's amazing.
at least the beginning part.
I love it. I hadn't thought about telling story in that manner. That is excellent, Kyle.
Thank you.
Sheesh.
In similar ways to we relate to our beliefs, like you've mentioned, we tell stories about our own stories, and it actually influences how we would think to talk about them or what we would choose to talk about or why. And I've found that there is a transformative process within even examining these stories and applying them to different frameworks and changing how many of the people I work with relate to themselves first, which I feel like is really kindred to the work that you were describing today.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
That's fair.
I'm processing it. I don't know. The thing I struggle with telling stories is being factual and concise
Yeah.
versus taking people on the journey like you did. You had me imagine I was sitting at a desk with you, looking at a ring with you, getting an email with you, versus telling me, "Oh, I got an email and it said this." By the way, I had a ring, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I just love how you put it into this context of kind of like playing out a movie, showing people the scene and helping them feel through the scene and experiencing it. Because
Yeah.
it's actually really easy for me to look back and say, that's just what is. That was a fact that happened to me, and forget about all the emotion, forget about the stress that it might have caused. And it's much more powerful for the audience to go through that stress with me and relive it so that they see the importance and the value of how I navigated it and the outcome as a result. I didn't fall apart. I didn't lose my company. I'm in a much better place. I've grown 10x since then. Yeah, that's incredible. I love it.
Well, brilliant, and yeah, it helps us. One of the big differences that I was talking about in another solo episode that I'll be publishing probably right before this one is there's a concept called the courtroom truth, which is kind of how we think about truth a lot of the time, what we would testify on the podium or whatever of exactly what happened, how it happened chronologically. And a lot of us try to adhere to this truth, and it is important to adhere to that truth in certain circumstances, but it usually means we emphasize too many details and we emphasize things equally, and it dilutes the personal truth, the vision, the message. And so maybe you didn't actually have a ring, and maybe you didn't actually, or like the desk was somewhere else. Um, but the essence of why you are saying this and what you are saying this comes through. And I find when you can understand the difference between a courtroom truth and personal truth, it takes a lot of pressure off of the speaker, especially if they're highly intelligent and process oriented, to make sure that they check every box and say it exactly everything that happened.
Yeah, no, that is a great point because I am like that. I'm very rules based, and the rules are what happened in the way it happened, accurately with details. And you're 100% right. Like I don't think I had the ring at my desk. I don't think that was a safe place to keep it, but I could have received it that day. I could have had it there. Who knows? And it's irrelevant whether that's the honest, 100% accurate or not, because it still plays out the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It plays out the circumstance of the fact that I have just invested in a ring and invested in committing to a marriage and my lifelong partner in the face of this massive loss towards my business. And that's what we need to get across. You're right.
And the fun thing is, in between exactly that and that moment, it's actually when we're telling this story for a talk or something, or the talk that you will be doing this for, while it is important to reflect on what you were actually going through, this is an opportunity to paint what our clients or the perfect readers for this book are thinking to themselves, are saying to themselves. And it infuses a different purpose into our story to focus on them and what they need and what their language around the experience is, and tailor how we describe what we're going through to them, which
Mm-hmm.
is one of the ways that we meet our audience with storytelling rather than trying to bring them to where we are.
Yeah. 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 I do understand that I've gone down a road that they may not have gone down. And some have gone down similar roads or partway down the roads. I need to take them down the whole road with me if I want them to see the possibility of the outcome that I have. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of seeing possibilities, do you have any closing thoughts for us today? And where can we go to get a hold of the book?
So the easy answer is it's on Amazon. It's under Richard D. Walker, or you can search for "It's My Life." I I can change if I want to. Um, yeah, what I what I want for people is what I've always wanted for myself. I want to be the best version of myself. And so therefore I believe that my core purpose in life is to empower others to be their best version of themselves. But it's all I can do is offer the opportunity for them to take that journey for themselves. When people understand their beliefs, there's another really amazing thing that happens. If you can understand your core belief and decide to change it, you will never choose a worse belief, Kyle. It's impossible to choose a worse belief. Would you go from I will always be unhappy to I'll be miserable? No, you're going to choose happiness over unhappiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to go from poor to destitute. You're going to go from poor to rich in your mind. You're always going to choose a belief that helps you. Even if it's not the ultimate best belief, it's going to be better than what you have. So that way, you're always striving to become your best self. And I love it when people flourish because they have the right beliefs for them. I'm not saying adopt my beliefs. Those are mine. That fits me. Adopt the ones that help you be your best. And you'll have the best happiness, the best success, the most fulfillment, the most engagement, the most relationship, whatever it is you're after because of that. So that's what I want for the world. I hope people can embrace that and go after it. Whether it's my book or anything else, the methodology is the methodology. And I even argue there's dozens of methodologies to do this exact same thing.
Yeah, I love that. What a great closing thought. No matter what step you take, it's in the right direction. Rich Walker, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you.